In studio, Brenda, I have Regina Mangan, who is with Liberty Blue Estate Agents in Waterford. Regina, say hello to Brenda.
Good morning, Brenda and listeners.
Hi, Regina.
Thanks very much for joining us. Regina was on RTE the other night on the Monday Night Live. Brenda, you wrote a very interesting article about winter evictions ban and saying that it's cynical populism. Explain to me why you believe it's cynical populism, please.
Well, Damien, I've become even more convinced in that conclusion after I heard, I think it was Mary Conway of the Property Owners Association say that not one single eviction will be prevented by this piece of legislation. That the run-in period for evictions is so long that anyone getting their notice at the beginning of November anyway could not expect to be out until the spring. So first of all, it is completely ineffective and pointless. But I mean, I suppose my broader concern about it is that it feeds into a narrative that puts the blame for the housing, of the rental crisis, firmly on the shoulders of private landlords, and that they're the ones who are responsible for this, and they're the ones who must be penalised in order to resolve it. And that is just not fair. You know, if I think I read a statistic to suggest that private landlords, the majority, more than 50%, their income from the property that they are renting is less than 10,000 a year. So it's not the great big money tree that the left-wing parties would portray it as being a private landlord. And it would seem to me that this is a further restriction on their rights. I don't believe, and I mean, I suppose, again, I've never been a landlord, but I've certainly been a renter, and in my experience, what most landlords want is a reliable tenant who will pay the rent, who look after the place, who won't annoy the neighbours, who will be happy to settle for sort of quiet and peaceful enjoyment of the property without too much hassle. And they are happy in most circumstances, once that person is paying the rent and they have an income coming in steadily, not to evict them. Landlords, by and large, do not want to be evicting people. That runs contrary to their business model. The whole idea is to get somebody in, get them in situ, leave them there, and maybe forget about it, and let them have a quiet life, and both of you have a quiet life. So this, first of all, this perception that landlords run around throwing out perfectly good, decent, compliant tenants on a whim is false and fraudulent and dishonest and unfair. And I cannot see how this narrative does anything other than this particular piece of legislation does anything other than fuel that narrative. And I fully believe that Mary Conway, when she said it won't save one single person.
Again, I'm going to come back to you in a second. I just want to bring Regina in, and I won't keep you too long, Brenda, but Fine Gael are not a left-wing party. Are you saying that they've been hijacked by the left-wing liberal agenda that's out there? They've been brainwashed?
They've seen how this is playing for Sinn Féin, and as you know, Damien, the legacy parties, as they're called, are terrified of Sinn Féin, absolutely terrified. And this seems to be a measure that Sinn Féin is promoting then cynically, and knowing that it won't make any difference, knowing that it won't save any tenant or prevent anybody being evicted.
So you're just saying this is total politics. Now, I had Owen O'Brien on this programme before, and he was defending landlords, and Regina's going to talk about landlords in a second, but you just...
a change of tack from Owen O'Brien, mind you, to be defending landlords, because he has been the one saying all along that he would stop them being able to install their own family members in their own properties, and he'd stop them being able to sell their properties.
He's saying, and Sinn Féin would say, I'm not defending it, I'm just quoting them, they're saying that their policies would actually help landlords in many respects, particularly smaller landlords.
Right, well, that's a bit of a change of heart from them. But anyway, but I mean, with good reason, because small landlords are leaving the rental market at a rate of 5 to 1.
Yes, they
are.
are.
There's something like 2,000 properties to rent this time last year, or at least say in August of last year, and this August there was 700 for the entire country. So where are all these landlords going, and why?
Just hang on there for 1 second and just have a listen to what Regina has to say. Regina Mangan, you were on the other night on RTE on the Monday Night Live show. Your thoughts on this after these few days, and in particular what Brenda has to say there?
I think Brenda articulated the situation extremely well. I will concur with everything she said, and I've been in multiple discussions with Mary Conway from the Irish Property Owners Association. Definitely, this is a political move by our government. No question. I have said it in the studio over and over and over. This is not a housing crisis. This is a political issue. Okay? And it is reckless behaviour by the government, because What we've seen over the last 3 years, and it's expedited, is a huge exodus of private property owners. Now, these small property owners typically only own 1 to 2 properties, and I can tell you that 80% of our landlords only own 1 property. So the situation, I predict, come the end of this freeze on rent evictions, will be that the numbers will double and triple. Now, lots of people say, and Ona Bryn said this, that when a property becomes vacant and a tenant moves out, it will house somebody else. And I concur, that is the case. However, we must have private rental stock to have a functioning economy. So, for example, the government are doing a mass promotion to bring in staff from overseas because we don't have enough people to work, for example, in our hospital in Waterford University Hospital. I said it and I said it again. Until we have no accommodation for nurses and doctors, nobody really will sit up. So I was in hospital recently myself, and I would say the majority of nurses who are wonderful were not Irish. And I was afraid to tell them I was an estate agent because we don't have the rental stock. So at the moment we've 10 rental properties in Waterford. It will get worse. We need rental properties. More landlords, people who own property, they won't buy those properties because it is not an attractive business to be in.
Okay, Brenda, your response to that, please.
Well, I mean, we're pretty much on the same page here, I think, myself and Regina. You know, I mean, there are something like 48,000 properties vacant across the country that have been vacant for 6 years or more. Why, if renting is such an attractive proposition, such, you know, a boon for landlords, why are people not doing those properties up? There's €10,000 available now in the budget to do up a property. Why are they not clamouring to let out these properties? That 48,000 could put a big hole in the demand for rental at the moment. Why are landlords not flocking into the market? Why are they flocking out of it instead? Because it is the legislation is totally anti-landlord. I mean, you know, they said, okay, there'll be no ban on evicting a non-compliant tenant, someone who's not paying the rent, or someone who's committing antisocial behaviour. Sure, already as a landlord, try and get rid of those people. That could take you 6 months. You know, and I mean, the example that is being held up to us is France, where there has been since I think 1956 what they call the winter truce, a ban on evictions throughout the winter months. But I mean, France has a much more stable rental market than we do. Lots of people, 36% I think, happily rent through their entire lives. So that makes sense. In that situation, that people are much more entrenched and much more less likely to be evicted. But also, every spring in France, you have a glut of something like 120,000 evictions. So people are suddenly facing eviction that had been deferred over the summer, even in a stable rental market like the French one. So, you know, the reality will be that there'll be a glut of people coming on the rental market next April, and nothing having been done in the meantime to make provision for them.
Yeah, and we know there's a multitude of reasons and minutiae regarding the housing crisis, but my brother is renting a room in a house in Dublin, a 4-bedroom room, and he's paying over €1,000 at the minute, Brenda, and the landlord says he or she wants to take back the house in March, so he's going to have to leave. Now, that landlord is getting more than €4,000 a month. Now, Regina can go through the figures with me in a minute, but somebody texts in to say there's no such thing as a poor landlord. As a parent who's paid exorbitant rents while my daughter went to college, there's always a queue to fill up these rooms. So this person is disagreeing with what you and Regina are saying. Hello, are you still there? Okay, some problem there with Brenda. I think we'll let... sorry, don't know what's happened there. Brenda...
Hello, sorry, Damien. Sorry, I think I put you on mute there.
You put me on mute. No, go on.
Bear in mind that they are paying 50% of that in
tax, yes.
For a start. Yeah, and I mean, then there's repair and ongoing... refurbishment of properties. But I mean, the statistics show that the 50%, the majority of private landlords are earning around $10,000 a year. So I mean, I'm sure there are. Of course there are. And we know there's some of them in the dole. People who own multiple properties and are raking it in. But if I come back to the central question, if it's such a money spinner, why are people leaving the market? Why are they leaving the market in the numbers they are? I mean, I know a friend of mine who retired some years ago and let out his house in Dublin has not increased the rent on a 5-bedroom property in 10 years because he's good tenants. They pay the rent, they look after the place, they don't bother him if there's small problems. He's quite happy to let them live on a rent that they were paying 10 years ago. I won't make your listeners' teeth water by telling them how little it is for a 5-bed house in Dublin, but he is quite happy to do that because he said, I could put them out. Yes, I could double my rent straight away, but I could be buying no end of hassle with tenants who are never happy, who are going to haul me before the RTB when a bulb blows. I'm happy with a tenant paying regular rent whom I trust and who is happy to treat the place as their home. That's what landlords want. This Sinn Féin bogeyman landlord who is throwing tenants out willy-nilly just for some kind of purpose.
But now it's a Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, left-wing Fine Gael government that's doing this, Brenda. Come on, this is not a political thing.
Oh, you don't think that the fact that this is a measure that seems to be playing well for Sinn Féin is not a reason that they've stolen this particular measure? Of course it is. They think it's something Sinn Féin has been talking about, and so they've decided they'll nip in there and steal their clothes. I mean, that's going to be an awful lot more of. But the reality is, as Regina said, it's not going to make one little difference, and all it's going to do is further feed into the narrative that demonises small landlords and makes them say, why am I still in this business? I have a friend who works in lettings, and another pal had recently acquired a apartment or something and was talking about letting it out, and he said, don't go down the Airbnb route, go any route, leave it empty, don't let it out, you'll have no end of hassle. Just don't let it let it out.
Brenda Power, thanks so much for talking to me this morning. Appreciate it. God bless.
Okay, bye.
I'll let you go. Thanks very much. Brenda Power, Daily Mail columnist. Regina, there's no such thing as a poor landlord.
I think, like anything in life, there are good and bad in the business, and that is a fact. There
like
are
radio presenters, good and bad ones.
And good and bad solicitors and good and bad agents, good and bad everything. There are definitely some people with property out there who take advantage of their tenants. I absolutely 100% stand over that. However, that is not my experience as a small business owner in Waterford, because we deal with people who typically own one property, 80% of which, in actual fact, I would say that the majority probably end up with about 5,000 a year annually after taxes and expenses. It's nowhere near 10,000. We did an analysis of the rents across 350 properties, and we worked out that €1,000 was the average. Okay, some are a lot less. I spoke about Noreen, who's a landlord of ours. She's a property on the Cork Road. Her rent is $550. The rent pressure zone came in overnight. $550 gross. That means it's treated like PAYE income, and she has a mortgage of $700. Do the figures. She's at a minus. Okay. So there are lots of people in that situation.
So do you think, because again, a lot of people have made representations to the government about the housing crisis, and we've got John Cummins, who is one of the party spokespeople for Fine Gael in this constituency as a senator. Do you believe there's a demonisation of landlords, as Brenda says, and that this is effectively a Sinn Féin-led crusade?
Definitely, and I suppose, look, social media has a lot to do with this as well. If you think about how they've managed to get the likes of Donald Trump right into government, so it's a form of
You're not comparing Donald Trump with Sinn Féin, though.
I'm comparing Donald Trump, how it's mobilised people. Right, how social media can mobilise people. So now we have a large proportion of people mobilised to anti-landlord. Now, I hate that word because it has such negative connotations. These are regular people. We did an analysis of our clients who own properties. Lots of them work in factories. They work in healthcare. They work in retail. They're not fat cats. There was a couple actually whose house we sold recently. I won't say where, but top of the town. Okay, 3-bed mid-terrace house. The tenant was a RAS tenant, which is a rent payment by the council for the last 10 years. The rent was $500 a month. The property, when the tenant moved out, required thousands to bring it up to a place where we could photograph it and sell it. If ideally another landlord would buy that property, another small property owner, and rent it out, but they can't, because $500 the next rent on that, because the rent pressure zone, would be €510. Try paying tax at 52% on €510 and then take away the expenses. You probably end up with about $175 per month.
Somebody agrees with you 100%. I rent out one apartment as part of my retirement plan. If my tenants defaults on the rent during the no eviction period, they'll be issued with an eviction notice the day after this period ends, and I will most likely sell the property. Can I just go back to the political thing just for a minute, please? Because those that are in government and in the civil service are not, they would say, being politically swayed. So Fine Gael are not a left-wing party. They would say they represent all different classes. Fianna Fáil would say the same. Like Sinn Féin, you've met David Cullinane. You know David Cullinane.
I met Eoin O'Brien. He was in my office a few months ago.
He's not an evil gargoyle. He's not somebody that's going to jump up and bite you.
No, he's a very smart guy and he seems to understand the market very well. However, politicians want votes. And in my opinion, the whole country has been mobilised to demonise property owners. Now, let's just look at what the outcome is going to be of this. So here we are, and we don't have rental properties for the private market. They're going to pause rent evictions and basically drive landlords out because they're just going to be sick of the whole thing now because there's just no reason to keep them in it. They leave the market and we'll have a pile up come the 1st of April of backlog of evictions, and then we'll have more evictions on top of that. So it's like a huge pile up. It's almost like they're putting plastic on a volcano, right? That's how I see it. We are hemorrhaging rental properties, but nobody's gone back to the root cause of the bleed. So the bleed needs to be stopped, the root cause, and then there will be absolutely nowhere for people to live. And there is some fixes that I would like to propose.
You are, I would say, just a free market person. I'm going to play devil's advocate here on this, okay? You want to get rid of the rent pressure zones.
No, I don't. I think
you want to get rid of Sinn Féin and their message.
No, what I want is the likes of the people who own the property, the house at the top of the town where the rent is 500, where those houses that have been caught in the rent pressure zone, that they come up to a fair market value. Now, I mean fair.
Okay.
Adjudicating that is another story, Shinshgay fair. I look at some of the properties advertised on Daft today and I'm outraged with the rental prices. I wouldn't stand over them, right? Okay, like there's a property in Dungarvan for rent, I think it's $1,500 for a one bed. That's not good enough, right? I don't support that.
And that's not in a rent pressure zone?
No, it's not. So I welcome...
And that's the reason that rent pressure zones were brought in, not by a Sinn Féin government, by a Fianna Fáil, Green and Fine Gael government.
Yeah, but I don't think one size fits all. So if you can imagine Noreen on the Cork Road of 500, her neighbour can charge 1,300. So one would be exasperated by that. So we don't have a level playing field. So definitely there are property owners out there taking advantage. Some actually put in a false air code so they can charge more. I don't approve of that. So I'm not saying all property owners are good people. No, they're not. I'm representing the people who play fair. Right? And I'm also saying, as I said to you, and I sent you a recording from an interview a year ago and I predicted it has gotten worse. So unless we try to keep the incentivise as opposed to decentivise, we will have less stock. And what is the government going to do between now and this moratorium on rent evictions? What are they going to come up with? And I know all the politicians and I will challenge all of them, including John, right? And say, what are you going to do? You'll give us all these statistics, but the problem is the government is too slow. Everything is too slow. It's terrible. I could not run my business the same way the government runs our business.
Regina Mangan, thanks for talking to me this morning.
Thank you.
Deise today.